Welcome to Creative Conversations with Roger Humphrey, the fine arts podcast where I get to talk with composers, performers, authors, visual artists, filmmakers, and others in the arts. Before we begin, please hit the like, follow, or subscribe buttons. It's a very easy thing to do, and it goes a long way towards supporting the channel, and it really does help a lot. Hey, if you or someone you love plays guitar or ukulele, please consider visiting my website at www.rogerhumphrey.com and looking at the many things I have to offer. Much of it's for free. If you like what you see, please take a moment to subscribe. I promise, I won't send you any spam, just occasional updates. And Don Schechter is an award-winning filmmaker, composer, educator, and author who's founded Charles River Media, a production studio and creative consultant firm. His best-selling book, Ascendants, was just recently released to great reviews, I might add, and I'm very pleased to welcome him to the show. Hi, Don.
Hi, Roger. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate this a lot. So I really need to talk to you about Ascendants. I got a list about this long of things I want to talk about. But Ascendants is at the top of that list because admittedly, I haven't had a chance to read the book yet, but it's the beginning of summer, so that'll happen.
Just came out. You've got time.
But that said, looking at the clips and the reviews and the other things that have been written, I'm really fascinated by it. But also, Ascendants is not just a book. That started off as a different life, didn't it?
It did. I mean, it's almost embarrassing how long this project has been around. I don't even know the year it started in. It originally started, it was originally a 2-hour script that I wrote. I was in my 20s. I'm no longer in my 20s or my 30s. And
I got underwear that old.
Me too. And at one point, I was working on another project. I was early in my career as a producer and a director, and early with my company, my production company, and I had this sort of like scene that came to mind, and it was a scene that's ultimately in the book. But I was like, what is this scene about? And it was like fully fleshed out in my head, but it was just about a husband and wife, and the wife is very sick, and the husband's asking her to just stay with him, stay alive a few days more, and then she'll be able to ascend. I didn't know what that meant, but I had the visuals in my head. I'm a visual guy. And from that, I spent a couple years trying to think about a world where this made sense.
Wow.
And then once I had the rules of the world, that's not a story, right?
Right.
Stories about people and relationships.
Right.
So then I started thinking about, well, what's the real story in this world that someone might like? So that took some time. And then I said, all right, I'm young. I'm like, I can, write a script and like do what was called a rip reel. So back then, you'd basically make a trailer based on other trailers. So you take 5 seconds of this trailer, 5 seconds of this trailer, put it together to like, hey, this is the idea of the film I want to make. And back then I wanted it to be a film because that's what I thought I wanted to do. And I said, no. I was this obnoxious kid. I was like, no. I know people we do films here in Boston. We do stuff. I'll make something. And so I wrote a 2-hour feature script, and then I looked at it, and I'm not that great of a screenwriter. And I said, first of all, I don't think it's that good, but the story's there. But I need like $80 million to make this sci-fi epic. How am I going to do that? So at that point, I should have tried and got the script looked at. But I'm like, no. I'm going to make my own rip reel out of my own footage. I'll write a series of a short film, just one short film, that takes place in the world of this story, not the main story, just takes place at some point in the timeline of this mythology.
Okay.
We'll make it with my team, a great group of collaborators. We'll make it, and then someone will pick it up and love it. So we made the first film. It was a short film. It did well. Like, I was young. It got to be at a bunch of festivals. It was at the Chinese Theater in LA for a festival. Like, it did decently. And that was so much fun that I'm like, oh, it really helped like narrow down the ideas that ultimately would end up in the book. I'm like, you know what, let's do one more, because I met a great actor while doing that first short film who came in for a small role, Johnny Lee Davenport. And I'm like, I want to write a film just for this man to speak. He's been in The Fugitive. He was in Joy. He's a great theater actor, amazing man, deep voice, great presence. So I wrote a short film, a 30-minute film, basically for him and his character. while we were doing the editing on that, I'm like, you know what? Let me do one quick one in my studio, a different. So I had these basically tone poem films that were made
Wow.
over the series of like 5 years. Then I got a grant from Vermont, a town in Vermont, to go do a fourth one up there. So time really went on in this project. And it was going on, I was getting a little bit of interest in this. And I even had a talk with a major studio about, I'm gonna say 2 weeks before COVID hit. I was
Wow.
on a phone call with them and seeing if there was interest, and that was set up from a producer. And throughout all that time, people said, "Well, if you want this to be a film or TV series, do you have a book? It really should be a book by now." I was like, "Oh my God, I don't have a book." So COVID hit, and I'm like, number one, this story is no longer a film. It's a novel, it's a series of novels, and it's a TV show. That's what this story ultimately is. So starting COVID is when I started the process of turning those original ideas, that original script, that original treatment into a novel. And it just came out in March of 2026. So we're just approaching 3 months since the book came out. Um, and yeah, I've been really lucky. It's done really well on Amazon. I've gotten some amazing reviews. I've got some amazing praise quotes that are in the book from like the science advisor to Star Trek and inventor Ray Kurzweil and a bunch of other folks. So it's doing really well, which is great. But it's got a lot more to go. I try to get it out to as many people as possible. I'd love to get it made into a TV show one day. Not me. I'm going to hand it off, hopefully, at
When
some
you
point.
when you say TV show, are we looking something grand like Game of Thrones kind of TV show? Or are we looking like a episodic series like Star Trek was? Or
My heart is an episodic.
okay,
However, I think there's a happy medium. So it's funny you said Game of Thrones because we laugh around here because some random reviewer online said this is like a science fiction Game of Thrones and the book. And I don't think it is at all, but I will take it. I will put it on banners and I will tell everyone someone out there on the internet said it's a science fiction Game of Thrones. I don't get it at all, but I'll take it. No, I mean, I love the original Star Trek and how episodic things were.
uh huh,
Um, that said, I also love a show like Babylon 5, right? Which was
oh yeah,
it was episodic and also had a full 5 season storyline.
right,
And it was really that nice middle ground of episodic where, the original Star Trek things just reset every episode,
right.
which, we don't love now as consumers, but but it also had, but we sometimes like we're just getting shows or stories that are like one story, 10 episodes now on streaming, and that's it. So, if I'm going in the visual medium, I kind of want something that's both of that. What's great about novels is that, it's a main story, but as you're going through the novel, there are these little sort of side quest, episodic things that can happen. So with this story and this mythology and the amount of time I think that I put into this world, there's a lot of stories to be told because it's such a rich world and I think such interesting characters that any reader will find someone that they're interested in sort of diving in more and hearing more stories from in this.
I had an author on recently. Actually, she's been on twice now. Her name is Rachel Rosano, and she's an East Coaster. She writes science fictions, historical, romantic fantasies.
Science fiction, historical
Yeah,
romantic.
okay.
Okay.
So basically, kind of sword and sorcery kinds of things,
Hmm.
but they have a historical background, but it's still a damsel in distress and all that kind of stuff going on. And and uh, and she's written like 19 books or something like that now.
Wow.
And but she will take inspiration from some minor character who just sort of popped up in chapter three. And the next book will be all about that person and that person's backstory and how they ended up in that spot in that intersection. And I think
Yeah.
it's fast. And she's got a huge following. I mean, huge following.
Yeah.
And but because she's created this entire world, and I just really, it's not a genre that I would normally be attracted to as a
Sure.
consumer, but as a creative person, as well as just somebody who's appreciates good commerce. Well, yeah,
Like we're all
good
looking for good
job.
commerce. Well, that's a feat to do 19. It took me this long to get one out. So kudos to her. But yeah, I think people like rich worlds where there's a lot of depth. Like, since I've been in fourth grade, every year probably I read Dune because every time I pick up that book, I get more and more out of it. And so I think, or the Lord of the Rings people love, right? Because it's
Right.
so complicated and there's so many little nuances to get into. So I think people are certainly drawn to that. I, you know, For me, I don't know if Ascendants is that complicated in terms of that. I think it's more about, the book is set in a sort of a modern dystopia, so it's not too far off into the future. It's not too fantastical, but there's been really significant technological changes
Uh-huh.
that the book follows from modern day into the next couple decades. That probably when I started the book seemed much more fantastical or more sci-fi than the world we live in the last 3 or 4 years with AI, right? We're living in a
Right.
very, unprecedented moment. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
the rate of technological change is so dramatic right now that we're seeing it every month. Something dramatically changes with AI, and it
Right.
changes, who's in charge. So, I mean, ultimately, the backdrop of Ascendants is about talking. It's about a story about a fractured family. I mean, it comes down to a family who becomes a target of this institution. But, the backdrop of the world is about having the reader, having the audience of Ascendants think about, what are the technologies that define who we are? How are we affected by technology? And how are we affected by the people who control the technology, right? It's a handful
Right.
of billionaires or a trillionaire who might control who might control the technology that affects, the global economy, that
Right.
affects wars, that affects people's beliefs and systems. So it's not that fantastical to think about how a shift in technology, how something new might dramatically alter society, religion, belief. And that's ultimately the backdrop of the book.
So, yeah, I can't wait to get into it. The thing that I like about it is there's a level of intelligence there. It's not mindless. It's not predictable. It's not it's not space cowboys.
Right.
It's something a lot deeper than that. So it sounds to me like you got to settle down and plan on taking your time to read it, which I'm looking forward to. Like I said before, so
Well, I will say it's funny because I've gotten a lot of good reviews, and I keep all the ones that are a little bit more critical. I love them, and so most of the critical reviews say this would work better as a TV show. So I love that. I've got that printed on a banner too. Um, but actually, it's a quick read. It's not one that makes you sit down and think. It moves fast. It's
oh
it's
really?
been called a techno thriller. It moves fast. There's a lot of shifting POVs. There's a lot of action in it. There's a lot of emotional conflict. But my publisher, one of the first things that they had me do was cut out 35,000 words, I think. I think it was
Wow.
well over 120,000 words, 130,000 words, the first draft I showed anyone. So there's a lot of stuff. So some of the criticisms, like, I wish there was more. I'm like, I had more. I had to get rid of it for the publication. But you can put as much time as you want into it. You can pick it up and read a chapter. You can sit down and read the whole book in one or two goes, because it does move fast. But I'm hoping that, there's enough there that'll, just like how I love rereading books. Like, I've reread, like I said, Dune and Ender's Game and all these books my whole life. I'm hoping that someone gets to the end and says, I want to go back and check this thing out one more time and see these pieces, because there's a big mysteries involved, and a lot of these pieces come together at the end, and a lot of the breadcrumbs were laid throughout the book, and not everyone picks up on that. So I'm hoping a second read, a third read, people will say, this is where the foundation was led. I didn't put these pieces together, but now I see it, and now maybe there's a larger point here for me to think about.
So the book itself is not the end goal. The book itself is like one step in a series in the journey. It's a way station. Um, uh, what's what's the biggest challenge for you in taking this simple idea that just hit you all those years ago, and in taking it to here, and then taking it to other
The
places and
next.
doing other things?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of answers to what the challenges are. I think for the novel in some respects is the end goal, because it is the story that I've wanted to tell for 15 years. This is the story of Ascendance that I've been dancing around for years. All the short films I did, we did a web series during COVID where everyone was isolated, where actors were online doing these short pieces. That was all just in, little snippets. There's a timeline of Ascendance, like a historical timeline, and these stories were there. This book was the end goal. This is the story I've always wanted to tell. The challenge was I didn't want to be a novelist. Maybe when I was a kid I did, but that's not my training. But nobody else was telling the story, so I had to do it. So I took my time because, part of it is sometimes people who are novelists, they just churn out books. Some are great, some aren't. I think because I didn't have that experience at first, I really took my time to make sure it was done right. So that's a challenge. Another challenge was, there's gatekeepers along the way, literary agents,
Oh yeah.
talent agents, studios, no matter what it is. So it's always about sort of getting past those folks and getting to those folks. So I think that's probably the challenge where I am now is both getting the book out to a wider audience, as well as if this book has more life to it, if the story has more life to it, is that going to be future books, which I've got the stories ready to go? Is that going to be, an Apple or HBO series or something? That really depends on luck and connections and timing and getting to the right gatekeepers.
So you're also a filmmaker, and so I guess my question here would be, how does the way you tell a story in film and the way you tell a story in your book, how do they influence one another?
Yeah, so it's funny because it's like I did it backwards, right? Most people take the book and then they sort of dumb it down for movies, right? Or TV. So for me, doing the short film series or the film anthology, it's called the Ascendants anthology, allowed me when I was writing the book to have that world so clearly visualized in my head, which was very helpful for me. And I know that dialogue is easier for me than filling in all the
Huh.
moments in between. So I kind of feel like it was all done backwards in my case. But one of the things that was great is this. So that actor Johnny Lee Davenport, who I mentioned and who I dedicate the book to, he passed away in 2020. His voice was so clear in my head from doing those films that when I wrote his character into the book, it just flowed because
Huh.
his voice was so, it's like having James Earl Jones or Morgan Freeman. Like we all know who those people are and
Right.
their stature. So it's so easy to write for that person, how they looked, how they walked, how they thought, how they spoke, their impact on others. That was really easy for me, or easier than other things. And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had that experience prior to the book.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you've written the book, you've got this story. So in future, like documentaries or other projects unrelated to the book,
Yeah.
do you see an influence coming from the book into that work? Because it's all storytelling, right?
It's all storytelling. Whether it's storytelling about some sci-fi story, or I did a TEDx talk about storytelling. Your own story and how you communicate your own story
Uh
is
huh.
really important. People don't sort of talk about their biography in a way that makes sense. That tells a story that
Right.
communicates who they are as a person and what their skills are. People need to learn how to do that. So I think the process of writing the book, creating this world, is certainly something that has shaped a lot of what I do. I mean, I'm working on a grant project right now that's not a fiction story. It's a grant on, well, I can't get into it, but it's a grant
Well, get into it. That's
about a
fine.
it's a humanities project where I'm looking, okay, so one of sort of my sort of side quests that has developed from just this being in the background in my mind was that I'm very interested in looking at the eras of speculative storytelling about science fiction, and how people think about science fiction is all about thinking about the far future and what that's going to be like. And there are certain trends where, like, you go back to the 60s and 70s, the sci-fi was all about environmental fears, nuclear war fears,
Right.
right? Then Soylent Green, right? Then you go to the 80s, it was like Planet of the Apes and Alienation. That's racism, immigration, right? But what I really want to look at and study is, we were approaching the Y2K, right? There was that whole, the computers are going to shut off when it hits midnight, in 2000. Planes are going to fall from the sky. Nobody knew what was going to happen. So a lot of the media, a lot of the sci-fi leading up to Y2K in that last decade was about, this millennium is going to kill us, and how do we prepare, and like what are the conspiracies behind the technology. So a lot of the X-Files and a movie I love called Strange Days was all about that. Sort of, rehearsing for the future is how I'm sort of
Right.
understanding that's what sci-fi does. Then when Y2K happened and we survived it, everything was great. We were past the internet, the internet boom. Y2000 was great. Everything, the future was looking good. A lot of the storytelling was actually looking back. We were doing like prequels.
Oh
It's
yeah.
kind of a nerdy example, but like Star Trek went to Enterprise to look back at how the future began. But then it didn't do well. And I think it came out the week after or the week of, I don't remember the dates of 9/11.
Oh,
So 9/11 kind of subverted the trends for sci-fi. And then everything became the apocalypse isn't coming. We're in the apocalypse. It happened. And how do we survive as a people? And what's the price we're paying for surviving? So you've got zombies, you've got Battlestar Galactica. I mean, I lean towards movies and television, so that's what I'm talking about. And so it was all about surviving the apocalypse. And then things shifted, and a lot of science fiction started ending their stories with a religious bent. It was like it's God or an angel or supernatural figure that was the answer to all the sci-fi elements previous. And around then, when I was like, I don't really like that. Like, why can't sci-fi be sci-fi? And I think a lot of Ascendants actually came about through that thinking through. But then where we are now is that, again, like we're living in such an unprecedented moment, right? We're seeing AI have such a dramatic change on society, much faster than like the Industrial Revolution did, right? And so people are so concerned or thinking or worried or just speculating about how that's going to shift society that the storytelling that I think is evolving now is going to be all about that, about the people who are in control of our technology and the effect that they have. So it's funny, that wasn't my intent when I came up with the story of Ascendants, but I think that's why it's so important, so great that it's coming out now, because this book, I think, is part of this new era of science fiction storytelling where it's all about rehearsing for when the control of technology is in the hands of a few, and what happens if those few become compromised. And what if the technology becomes compromised? How does that affect us as a society? So that's kind of where, a long-winded answer to like, how does this relate to other projects? But like that, it's all intertwined there together. But I think there's a really humanities look at what's going on in our storytelling here.
I think I saw a cartoon, I don't know if it was New Yorker or what, recently. It just kind of encapsulated a lot of people's fears about AI and such and technology, because we always fear the unknown, right? And so,
Right.
if you remember the Jetsons TV show,
Sure.
and the cartoon showed Rosie, the housekeeper, sitting in a chair with her feet up or her legs up,
Her leg, yeah.
watching television while George was vacuuming. And I thought, there's the fear
the
right
future.
there. Which I thought was funny.
I love it.
It's hilarious. So
Yeah.
well, your company, Charles River, you also consult with other companies, corporations, and other entities for creative purposes. Is that correct?
So Charles River Media is a company that I started kind of by accident 21 years ago. So we do quite a bit. So we're based in Boston. We do video production, we do film and documentary and television, we do commercials. We do a lot of corporate storytelling, a
Sure.
lot of brand work, a lot of telling the stories of products and services. We have a division called LXD Research that does educational technology. So we have a little media empire here in Boston. What's great is that, every day is different. Sometimes I'll be working on the book or the promotions of the book. Sometimes I'll be directing a show here. We have a studio. We'll do live streaming. Sometimes we'll do commercials. So, it's a pretty interesting life that I kind of found myself in. It was never intentional. It was the short version of the story is I had gone to grad school for music right after college. I was a composer and I was studying conducting a little bit too. And I said, okay, I did 2 years of my master's degree, and now I'll do 2 years of like this film video thing and see which one I want to sort of focus on post that.
Sure.
And it was right around the time that digital video became accessible to people. So I was able to do work and, at one point buy a camera for $20,000 that used to be $120,000, a similar type thing and
Right.
do work. But no one had, this was pre-YouTube, no one had figured out online video. And I did some freelance video projects for someone, and she said, oh, you should talk to these people in New York, this company called About.com. It's a company that, if you remember, like Ask Jeeves, you would like look up something on the internet, early internet, and you'd go to About.com and there'd be like, here's instructions on doing this thing you want, but you'd have to keep clicking page after page after page to read the whole thing because they would make money by showing you ads on every page.
Right.
And they wanted to get into video. And they said, we've been trying to do these short videos online. We're only getting like one a month from people. We don't know what the problem is. And I said something. I was like 25, 24 years old. I said, well, if you gave me like a whole bunch of them, I could put them together real quickly for you and do like a conveyor belt of these videos. And they said something like, okay, well, how about like 1,000 this first year? I'm like,
Wow.
okay, or something like that. I don't remember. It was decades ago, but it was essentially something like that. And I said, no problem. And I said, oh, I need help. I need a place to do this. And then like I hired my first assistant, and I'm like, oh, I need an office space to do it. And so for a number of years, I was just producing early online video for the internet. And then as that sort of became, the company was able to do that itself, I then went and got involved with documentaries and corporate videos and directing concerts and other things like that. And so 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, I'm like, oh, I have a business here. I should really, you know, maybe get a bank account for it or something. Maybe it wasn't that long, but maybe after a couple of years, I realized like I had a company. And so the company's evolved over the last 21 years into the facility we have here and the work and team that I have at Charles River Media. But it was kind of a accidental career at first that I've settled into.
I think the general public I don't think they understand how much work there is in industrial work.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they don't think about training films, you know, and instructional films and things like that you do,
Yeah.
you know, for a corporation, you know, and how we want you to treat the public or how we want you to do this job or things like that.
Right.
And that's just a whole.
It's a whole other world. It's
a
a lot
whole
of
industry in
it's a
itself.
lot of storytelling. I mean, a lot of what I do is, you know, historically has been interviewing. So we'll go to a business, a big company, and I'll interview people for a day and find out the story of them, who they are, what they do at work. And then the company we'll put together a 3 to 5 minute video that's like, this is who this company is, who we are as a collective of people, the work, the service, the product that we bring to the world, and why it's meaningful. And so part of my job is to bring out to interview others and find out like, you know, who they are and what they do is like the joke around here. But it's like, why is your work meaningful? And how do we communicate that in video form, which is short and
Right.
sometimes superficial to an audience? And, you know, every business, every company needs that kind of communication. Whether it's you're making a 3 to 5 minute video for the internet, or there's a big event and you've got thousands of people at a conference and you need to communicate a message to all those people quickly. And it's not just someone up there talking for half an hour. So that's a lot of what we do day to day here.
The technology has had such an influence on so many things. Back when I was, gosh, I don't know, I still had hair on my head. That was about 70 pounds ago. And I was just
I think we look great. I don't know what you're talking about. I almost shaved it off for this
Joe
meeting.
Garagiola, the sportscaster, once said that any man with a full head of hair is overdressed. So
I'm going to steal that. I like that.
I did. So anyway, but I started out starting my career as a musician. I'm a guitar guy. Starting my career as a musician, and one of the things that I was doing was writing music for industrial films.
Oh,
And back then I was competing with needle drop stuff, and so people don't understand that phrase. Companies would buy an LP,
Yeah.
actual physical record that had various snippets of music, and you would buy it for a lot of money, but you'd buy the rights to use anything on that,
Right.
and you would take and drop the needle of your phonograph.
yeah.
into a
And they called it
certain
needle
spot.
drops for a long time.
Right.
They still might do it. I know
Yeah.
10, 15 years ago when I was dealing with it, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I was, you know, kind of up against that. Went to college to start studying filmmaking, not because I wanted to be a filmmaker, but because I wanted to know what those guys are up to, because I wanted to write the music for them. And while I was doing that, the technology left me standing in the dust. And everything, I went from hiring out a studio and an engineer and all that kind of stuff to do this, to all of a sudden, overnight practically, people had their own home studios and they were getting great, you know. And so you get some guy who could do everything that I could do musically, and now he's got his own home studio and he doesn't have to pay that price. And so I got my throat cut rather quickly.
Yeah.
Today, and I was talking to a former student of mine who's in studying filmmaking in college, and I told him, I said, there's so much free stuff out there. I mean, you were talking about a $20,000 camera that used to cost $120,000, and some of these guys are making. And I told him, I said, you don't have to buy that film to make, or buy that equipment to make a film. You can buy an inexpensive camera or inexpensive microphone and use your iPhone, And you can, and if you can't do good work on that, you can't do good work.
Work on exactly. I mean, yeah. So I got a lot to respond there. So number one, I mean, I was so in the music front. So like I did my master's in music, and in composition, and I knew that I wasn't gonna be a professional composer. That I wasn't trained in film composing. I think if I
Right.
had that opportunity, I might have gone that route. I did love conducting, but I think the first time I was out of grad school and someone commissioned me to write music for them, I couldn't do it. I didn't like it. Writing for someone else I realized it was not something I wanted to do.
Different critter. Yeah.
It's different than writing it for yourself when you're
Right.
having, I had orchestras and choruses and ensembles playing my music in school. That was one thing. But when someone said, "Hey, can you write this piece of music for me?" I had one experience that was fine. I just didn't love it. And then when the second person did it after grad school, I was like, I don't think I can do this. What I ended up doing though was for the anthology series, I did end up doing the music myself,
Okay.
which I enjoyed. I might have overcomposed a little bit because I was had no one to
But you're
edit
doing
me.
it for yourself. Why not?
But I did it for myself, so I enjoyed it, and I loved the music. And sometimes when I wrote the book, I would actually play the music to get me in the mood. But to your point about the technology changing, yes, it's about people with a phone that can do it by themselves. However, our philosophy in my company side is, it's not always about the technology; it's about the talent and the team. And so we're always like one person, like you go to a movie, it's one person did that, pressed that one button, looked at that one light, look at that one thing, because that guarantees success,
Uh-huh.
which is like harder when it's one person and then a lot can go wrong in film. But yes, if you can't get it right on your phone, then you're not going to get it right with a team or,
Right.
$100,000 worth of equipment. But the technology, like, I feel so bad for voice artists. So we used to hire voice artists years and years ago.
Sure.
People would come into our studio. We have a voiceover booth. They'd record, we'd pay them to come in. They'd record a line. They'd leave. We'd edit it. They'd make a bunch of money, right? Maybe they make $1,000 or even more or whatever for it to come. Then all these people had their home studios. And so we would just email them the copy, the text. They'd record it in their home studio or their closet, wherever, edit it themselves, send it back. Great. Easy for us as the producers to just send it out. Then there were websites that were like, you can get anyone in the world to do it. So $100, somewhere else is worth more than $100 in the US
Right.
to do it. So then the talent, the pool became huge. So people who were professional voice artists had a really hard time. Well, now, right, there's AI voice artists. 2 years ago, it was terrible, maybe.
Right.
Now it's almost indistinguishable. Now I
Right.
hear on the radio, I know these voices, right? But for like $11 a month, you can join a site and just pop out voice after voice, voiceover after voiceover, and you don't like something, you just mildly tweak it. Or now you add like characteristics. On the music front, this one site that we use added like a whole music section. And a few weeks ago, I was like, what's this? And it's like, oh, just describe the jingle you want. Now, for commercials, I never did jingles. I hated them. It was expensive. You needed a band. It was
Right.
a whole thing. I just started saying, hey, let's pretend my book needed a jingle. Let me do a little Ascendants connection jingle. And so I did it, and it made up like the lyrics, and it sounded like it was a professional band. And I said, now make it like
Wow.
gospel music. And now all of a sudden it was gospel music. Now make it like a horror film. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, it's scary for people whose livelihoods depend upon
Right.
it. But from the content producing, it's so fun and freeing. So it's a real challenge for people in these industries. I mean, but we're seeing it from voice artists and we're seeing it from, computer scientists used to be like, that's the job to get for job security. And now everyone's vibe coding. So it's I love technology. So my book isn't anti-technology. It's not like every Apple product, I'm the first one to buy it. Like I love all the stuff. But it's something, that we have to, kind of get through as a society, how all this technology is going to change what we all do and how we create stuff.
Well, we've had things that have changed us historically, right? From gunpowder to the telegraph to automobiles, and I've always been the people who were afraid of that change, and
Yeah.
and I get it, but at the same time you got to look at it and say, well, a hammer can be used for good or evil. You can either build or destroy, and
It's a tool.
it's just a hammer. And
Yeah.
the same with AI, so
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing. So
It's like a
I got,
calculator. It's like, you're going to ask your accountant not to use a calculator or to use Excel because it lets them add quicker or do
Right.
rows. It's a tool like everything else. I think
Right.
the problem is it's affecting so many industries at once and in such a quick amount of time. where it's not like, okay, the car was invented that, changed a few things, or, refrigeration. It's so many different things at once with so many people.
So
That's
immediate.
it's so immediate that's the biggest shock to the system right now.
And of course, we have a history of science fiction telling us watch out for it.
Exactly.
You
Right.
know,
Is this going to be like the Terminator, or is this going to be a utopia? We don't know. And that's a good gets back to my book, is that like, it's all about the people who control the technology,
right.
and the politicians who may or may not be beholden to them, about whether or not we have the regulations and the restrictions in place to sort of manage it. And we just feel dreadfully behind in that regard. Right.
Good luck with this book, sir.
Thank you.
People can find it at Amazon, amongst other places, and I will make it a point to put a link to your website and to the Ascendant website in the descriptions below, as they say, and so people can get out there and find out more about it themselves, and the various companies who may or may not want to hire you for other projects. But thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you, Roger. It's great talking to you.
I am so happy. I'd like to thank Don Schechter for taking the time to come on the show. If you would like to know more about him, Charles River Media, or to get his book, please go to the link below. I'd like to thank you too for taking the time to listen. If you enjoy these podcasts, please share your favorite episodes with your friends and introduce them to Creative Conversations with Roger Humphrey.